Welcome to Creators and Coffee, brought to you by Autofluencer. And I am Erica Sietsma, CEO and co-founder of Autofluencer. And joining me today is Zee Kennedy, also known as Z or Z Drives on her Instagram. Welcome, Zendara.
Thank you so much.
So tell our audience a little bit about who you are and your background, because you're kind of new to the motorsports industry. So I would love for people to get to know you a little bit better.
So I'm someone who's doing everything backwards. I am a longtime stunt performer, stunt driver, stunt coordinator who kind of just accidentally got addicted to drifting, and through just wanting to get better at stunt driving and just loving drifting, I ended up just going further and further down the rabbit hole. And I ended up becoming the first woman in Canada to get a Formula Drift Pro Spec license. And now I'm the first Canadian woman to compete in the sport. It's a whole new world. It's definitely very different from my ordinary job, which is not very traditional, but yeah, I love it.
That's awesome. And I love to, we could talk about at the end, some of the things you kind of hit the Formula Drift scene and then real quickly, like brought some new things to them that they hadn't been doing, which I just loved as someone who was kind of a rookie, was like, hey, we should do this. And they're like, hey, that's a great idea. So we'll talk about that at the end. What I want to talk to about first, though, and you and I have had a lot of conversations and, kind of your thoughts of being somewhat new to now having to have a brand and having to have a presence, but based on your background, what you feel works and really resonates. So I'd love to hear a little bit more of you for your advice to kind of creators that are entering this space and now finding themselves like, oh, what do I do now?
For the length of my film career, I really took it as a point of pride that I was very private, that I didn't seek attention, and that I was like, no, I just show up. I'm like an assassin. I show up, I do the job, I leave. It's what I do. We should be seen, not heard. And coming into this space, what I realized is that my value within the motorsports space and my value to sponsors is the people that I can connect with and the people that are interested in my story, and that I can share the products that I love or the companies that I really enjoy working with, share their benefits with my audience. So building an audience has been a whole new thing for me, and walking that line of what is public, what is private, how much of myself do I share, which for me has been a journey for much of my life as a queer woman coming into first film and then motorsport. I never really was comfortable sharing all of myself until I felt safe. What I'm realizing is, especially now, I feel I'm not quite maximizing yet on that particular audience, because I'm not sure if you're aware, but lesbians of TikTok is huge. I just haven't found them yet. But when it comes to motorsports, of course, as you get into sponsorship, a lot of what sponsors are seeking from us or partners are seeking from us as influencers is we're selling their product. It's a new form of advertising.
It's not just a new form of advertising. It is the reigning most effective form of advertising on the planet right now. So let's just make that real clear that the creator economy is not a passing phase. This is like people 20 years ago being like, the internet, it's a phase. The creator economy is not a phase. It is here to stay, and it is the future of how brands can engage with more audiences. So I had to throw that out.
You're totally right. And I've watched it for the last probably 8 years as I was working on TV shows where suddenly characters were being cast, not from the traditional pool of actors, but how many followers do these people have? And in some cases, they had no TV and film experience, but they already had an established audience on camera that the production company or the studio wanted to bring in. So now your reach and the people that you're connected with more than ever has a value. And I can say, as I've worked on car commercials over the years, I've also seen, again, the talent that are being put in front of camera, or the way that it's being shot, or how much suddenly we're shooting vertical video on a car commercial.
Yeah.
It's very different. The industry is completely changing. And the one piece that I really struggle with as someone who has been I love story. That's part of why I got into film originally. I love telling stories. I happen to tell stories through action, but ultimately the goal is putting feelings into people. And those feelings are what make people do anything, right? I mean, emotion drives so many of our decisions, especially when it comes to buying. So I see a lot of these influencers or these YouTubers who have these massive audiences. They have these incredible stories that people have followed for years. And as they get recruited to collaborate with these companies, it loses some of the natural, authentic human element. It becomes this, as we were joking before, I'm so-and-so and I choose X or Y, which when you think about it is, if you look back at commercials from the 50s, that's all it was, right? There was no story. We weren't really trying to make people have feelings. We were just, someone was endorsing a product. And for me, as I get into this space and as I approach companies that I want to work with, I actually outright tell them I will not be a person holding a product and talking to camera. I don't find it compelling. I don't think it usually lands. And I want people to laugh or be curious or be engaged. And I want to be having a good time. And I want it to be something that I would watch. That's really important to me. So I'm
Right.
always trying to figure out, ways that we can creatively engage curiosity or tell a story or use a product. I always use the example, non-specific fun, right? I don't know if you ever watched a Mountain
Right.
Dew commercial or a beer commercial or anything like that. It's rarely about the product. It's just people having a good time adjacent to the product, because ultimately what we're doing is creating an association between the product and whatever we want people to associate with it. Personally, when I see these targeted or these paid ads that are on Instagram or on TikTok, I really love the ones where you don't know right away, oh, this is an ad. This is a story that I'm entertained by, and
Yeah.
here's the product. Someone is going to have a lot more tolerance for that if it's actually funny. I don't want to be pandered to. I don't want to be sold to, but I do want to be entertained. And if someone can do that, and I think that bar is getting higher and higher as there's so
Yeah.
much content available at all times, that's the ultimate goal.
And I love that so much because it is to my point before that the creator economy is here to stay. And how these creators, in many cases, became so large is they had a story to tell and they were good at telling a story. And not all of them were super famous race car drivers that already had a following. So the second they turned on social media, boom, they hit a million. It was usually maybe someone who's up and coming in motorsports, someone who's building a
Hmm.
car and they're telling the story of this build or their rookie season or whatever it is. And the audience starts engaging. And it's through that now you need to keep that person authentic to what they're doing, right? They need to stay authentic to that story they built. And I think it's really important for both brands and creators to remember that. And as a brand, give that creator, if you picked a creator to collaborate with, give them the freedom to keep it authentic, right? Don't expect that they're going to do a commercial. That's not why you collaborate. That's not why they have an audience. And if you want to convert that audience and truly have them be engaged in your product, you need to give that freedom and flexibility for that person to stay authentic to who they are and to what that audience is looking for, right? And to give them that freedom and flexibility to, entertain with what they're doing and whatever their form of entertainment is. Like
Yeah.
yours might be a bit specific around drifting around the product, setting yourself on fire around the product, but whatever.
I mean, it can be, but also, for instance, I am Canadian, right? I work with a wheel company, the only wheel company I ever wanted to work with, which is Conseil. I love their wheels. I love just everything about that company. And I came to them and I said, hey, I invented this new sport. It's called wheel curling. I'm calling it my Canadian cultural exchange. And I just go places and I do
Oh
curling. And we started it with my crew, like who are all American, and they always make fun of
my
me for
gosh,
being
this is
Canadian.
amazing.
And I've never done real curling in my life. But what's funny about that is compared to my audience, every time I make a video about curling, I get more than 3 times my audience's reach on those videos because no one's ever seen it before. And
Right.
that's sort of that underlying piece. But also to your point before, these creators that are being engaged by brands, you're talking about people that probably don't have formal business education, right? But that built this platform for themselves out of nothing from the ground up in a way that an expert couldn't. So we have
Right.
to trust that they actually know what they're doing,
Yep.
maybe organically in a way that someone with a marketing degree just won't, because they
Yep.
haven't done the trial and error and they haven't
Yep.
just put themselves out there. And I really think that that's a unique value that only these individual people can offer.
Hmm.
And no two influencers, no two creators are going to offer the same creative way of engaging with a product or with their audience. That's what makes them so special.
Couldn't have said it better. I think that's such a good reminder that, first of all, every creator is unique. Each and every one is going to be a little bit different. And that's where, as a brand, when you're creating a campaign, and maybe it's a brand ambassador campaign, and you might have 10 different creators, or it's a sponsorship program, right? And you have 10 different drivers that you're supporting, it's going to be different for every single one. And you can't get too specific in what you're asking them to do.
Mhm.
Could there be some pro tips? Yeah, sure. Like if it's a helmet sponsorship, maybe do put the helmet on the car or something like that. So it's a seen more, in more of the photos and more of the images, but not requiring some stunted, like, oh, this is my helmet. I love it,
Mhm.
and letting them, just do what they think is best. And, just remember, I love it. Everybody is unique. Everybody's a little bit different. I also really love what you said about you're basically opening yourself up. Each one has an experience in building this that they've created something so special and unique. You could not, as a brand, have a marketing team large enough to do what the creators can do. And it's nothing against marketing professionals. They are amazing. They work so hard. They're usually a very lean but mighty team. But when you're focused kind of on the brand narrative, it is really hard in the brand content, to tell a story in the same way that a creator's already doing. It's just hard.
It's again, it lacks that organic element. I
Hmm.
will say, as you were talking, I thought of something, and when it comes to especially mid-sized companies, because I would imagine that the very large companies are really good at getting their brand guidelines out there to influencers that they work with or creators that they work with. But again, because these are people coming into this space organically, I feel like sometimes there's a certain amount of expectations or criteria or boundaries that are really not communicated to creators. And so when a company is going, hey, make us a product,
Mm,
parameters are helpful, right? Especially if there's a no-go zone or we don't like this, we
right.
really don't like our brand to be associated with this. That
Yeah.
is something that a company can really help a creator by communicating clearly. When I worked on traditional commercials, they had, agencies, legal departments, all of these things. Every single time that I sit in a car, for instance, I know if I'm doing a car commercial, my seatbelt is on, my turn
Mm,
signals are on every time the car moves lanes, even if we don't know, like even if we don't see it, when we're shooting car to car footage, all of that stuff, all of these things are very important because the legal team for that very large company can never portray someone not wearing a seatbelt in a car or a car doing something that's
right.
technically illegal.
Yep.
So sometimes, and I guess back to creators, considering the use of the product, are you suggesting something that in a big commercial when you were watching TV 10 years ago, they would have a big disclaimer at the bottom about, or some guy
Yeah.
talking really fast at the end, so and so does not recommend, for instance, like I made a video where I was eating lug nuts for breakfast. Uh, not recommended by any dentist, right? Some sort of thing like that. I think it's really important to incorporate those things because again we're in an era where things are changing so quickly and companies can accidentally make all sorts of missteps, and that's something a creator could accidentally do on behalf of a company
Yeah.
as well. So that feedback and that Q&A in both
Yeah.
directions I think is often missing.
Yeah. And again, that's not, for creators, that's not inhibiting your creativity per se, right? So from a brand, you heard us saying, like, give them creative control,
Yeah.
but still within boundaries, right? So if you have legal things, like, for example, we had an oil company on, and, they've had to just disclaim, like, they have a cool can, it looks cool,
Yeah.
and they're like, no, don't pretend to drink it though. It's not an energy drink, so please, like, don't pretend to drink it. Like, you can have a lot of creative control, but please don't pretend like you're drinking the oil. Like, let's not do
Hmm.
that. And for a lot of legal reasons, we have to have that. And so you can have both, right? They're not mutually exclusive. You can still give creative control to tell the story to the creator, so it doesn't feel like a paid spot. But you can still have boundaries and guidelines and no-goes and, considerations for that creator. And that is something, you as a creator saying is very helpful.
Well, I mean, imagine being asked to draw a picture and then they give you a 2,000 colored pencil set. It's actually overwhelming compared to going, here are 15 or 30 colors, draw me
Right.
this,
Right.
and I really think that that helps get a product that at least, if we draw this whole thing, to use the analogy, and then we find out, oh no, we didn't want anything red. Okay, well, that
Right.
would have been helpful to know because there's 200 reds in here.
I think those are great reminders, right? Like, as a creator, tell your story. If you're new to it, what is your theme? What is your storyline? Like, be true to yourself. Like, have a storyline, a through line, because that will carry you, whether it's a project you're working on, who you are, have that. And as a brand, if you're partnering with someone, let them keep that storyline, but you can give them boundaries and parameters, and let them explore creativity. And I think the last thing there that I think is kind of helpful that you said, and like, you just happen to have the background in it. So I think your creativity, your agency background, kind of your advertising background and years of doing commercials and being in film, you already kind of think, I mean, I was lucky enough to be with you at CES and you're like, oh, I'm already picturing what the video could be. And you're so thoughtful in the content you create. I remember your recap from CES. I was like, damn, that's so good. Mine was like a hodgepodge and yours is this like beautiful, great reel. But for new creators or even existing established creators, find that space to explore your creativity. Just because you've started one narrative or you have one style doesn't mean you can't explore further and think more and up level your game and think about entertainment and take it to another level and try new things.
It's a really great way of saying it. Also, a question that I have found helpful when I'm speaking with a brand is, what is the message you're trying to convey? Or what is something that you're having trouble communicating to your audience? For instance, I worked with a company and they offer free shipping globally. It was one of the things they first told me when I started working with this company. I was like, wow, that's probably cost you a lot of money. And they were like, actually, we find it to be a really good value add in terms of our audience. And I noticed that every single one of their posts, they mention the free shipping, but no one ever knows. And so when I chatted with them, I was like, I have this idea. And it's a silly idea, but I had an idea about how to tell that story without it just being like, did you know?
Right.
And that for me, like, I love that challenge. I think for a creative person going, okay, how do I tell that story in a different way is a really good exercise. So maybe asking that question of what's an underappreciated feature that you're trying to share, or what's a message we're trying to tell? Is it that your company empowers people to do X or Y? Is it that your oil is better than others? Whatever it is, how can I communicate that in a way that is not so direct and linear?
I love that tip because we've gotten a lot on creators and copy from some of the other creators of asking the question, oh, what are your brand goals? Which is great. And a lot of the brands are going to say, oh, more sales, or they might focus on a certain product, right? Like, oh, we will really want to push, these wheels this year. It's our new product. Really want to get it out there. Or we want to push our marketplace or whatever it might be. But I love this one. And I haven't heard this one is, okay, then what's the messaging that you're trying to convey? What is the value proposition? What are your unique features, right? You as a creator are asked what your value proposition is for that brand, right? What kind of audience can you put me in front of? And inversely, I think that's a great question back to the brand, whatever that big goal was, or whatever it is. Okay, well, then what were the value proposition? What are those messages you want to convey? And then putting your creative thinking hat on. Because I'm going to say everybody that's out there as a creator, they're creative. Even if you don't think of yourself as creative, even if you think of yourself as a mechanic that just happened to stick, you are creative in what you have done. And, you can put that thought into it and help that brand tell that story in a way that's unique and authentic to you, the creator, right? But keep that message and that through line and, an entertaining way to tell that story. I love that. That's a great piece of advice. I think that's going to be the real right there. Something new. Any final kind of tips that you've got around kind of the power of storytelling?
In all of my years of making commercials and working on film sets, it's always the story that people connect with. It's always the story that I connect with. And I really think that what we're doing is giving people feelings. So that's why sharing our stories, that's why I believe, this is only an opinion. I haven't made a career out of studying this, but if you look at the people that have succeeded and the people that have these followings, we don't want to watch scripted, the TV shows that do well. They're stories, they're compelling stories that are engaging. They're not one-dimensional characters. We don't want to see these one-dimensional, like what Instagram and Twitter and TikTok now have given us access to is direct access to these human beings that we used to see just playing roles. And that's what is so compelling about it. I could leave a comment on some celebrity that I watched my whole life in movies, and there's a chance they might respond. There's this level of interactivity that is really unique to this space, and that's really its strength. And that comes back again to story, to the behind the scenes, to the feelings ultimately, which I think is what it's all about.
I think that's great. Final question. What is your favorite caffeinated beverage? This is Creators and Coffee. So it is okay if it's not coffee. Actually, a lot of people aren't big coffee drinkers. I'm not, but what is yours?
Every time that I order this beverage at a new place, they all go, oh, I've never heard of that. And that sounds really good. And that's because it is really good. So I usually get a chai latte, but I add chocolate syrup to it. It's fantastic.
That's a good one. That's a good one. What milk do you put in it?
Usually almond milk.
That's a good one. Yeah. I like it. First time we've had that one. All right. Well, Z, thank you so much for being on Creators and Coffee and great advice on the power of storytelling. I appreciate it.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me.